2, 3.
I'm Microsoft teaming with Microsoft Teams. I'm learning and dreaming with Microsoft Teams. The hub and the teamwork of Microsoft 365 in these quarantine times. I'm Microsoft teaming with Microsoft Teams. Yeah, with Microsoft Teams.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our final episode of this season of Inside Microsoft Teams. I'm your host, Stephen Rose, and thank you, as always, for joining us. This week, Teams calling, devices. We've had a lot of questions from folks. We did, Microsoft Teams rooms in our last episode, and folks are going, this is awesome, but what about things like hot desking, and do I still need to have a phone at my desk, and soft phones versus hard phones, and all of this? And I thought that's a great topic, and we should get an expert, because this is not an area that I'm an expert on. And guess what? We found one. Hi, Krithika. How are you?
Hey, Stephen. Good morning. Good evening.
You are our expert. So go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, and your role at Microsoft.
I'm Krithika Ponnasamy. I'm lead PM for Android personal devices, running Teams. I've been in this area for a few years, quite a few years. We've been building devices for our customers from Skype, and now, transitioning into Teams.
So as I took a look at this, there's really sort of four areas that we take a look at. And this is calling in the flow of work with, working smarter with an all-in-one app that brings everything together. The business critical calling with, AI powered calling experiences and partner software that drops in. And then it's about devices for all of these different scenarios that we have a really wide portfolio of partners, and it's super flexible. But at the core is really that it's simple setup and management, that it's easy to add, monitor, and manage voice and video calling from our Teams admin center. So when we talk about this, what are some of the kind of key areas that folks should sort of think about when they go, okay, we have this old phone system, we're ready to move? What are some of the things that they should think about or be aware of or take a look at? And I also want to talk about some of the cool key features that we've released as well with that.
Yeah. So let me just start with what are these Teams devices, right? So we want to clarify that they are purpose-built devices just for Teams. So Teams is the only app that's running on this device. You don't have any other apps running on the device. So this device was optimized to run Teams. These devices are typically built by our partner OEMs. We work very closely with them to certify these devices. And they can be deployed in multiple areas as well, right? They can be in shared spaces like conference rooms, phone rooms, huddle spaces, or it could be a personal device that's sitting on your desk. Another factor to consider, they could be Windows OS-based devices, they could be Android OS-based devices, or just peripherals. So when you speak about deployment and management, right, that's the other factor that we need to consider as well.
Well, let me just ask one quick question. Are we seeing a shift from people that had a desk phone that have now completely moved away from it and have moved to the on-computer soft phone, especially with folks going at home, working from home, which makes more of these purpose-built devices even more important and more valuable?
Yeah, so we had hypothesized, we've been doing this for a while now, where we kept saying nobody's going to be using a desk phone. Everybody is moving into, either the desktop client peripherals or just mobile phones. We see that happening, but they're also deploying desk phones. Even during COVID, Teams phone deployments have been in such an accelerated fashion. We've been blown away, right? Customers want these devices for specific use case scenarios. It may not be a typical IW scenario where I'm working with, on Teams with my team that is remotely located. It may not be that. I might prefer a headset if I don't have enough space in my home, or if I'm just, hot desking. But there are specific use cases where these devices are really, really critical. And again, right, we offer a variety of devices. It is not catering just to one. Customers have the option to choose what they want based on the scenario need for their user.
So obviously one of the big areas is when we get into things like call centers and call attendants and things like that, because that's not going to change. But we've added a lot of functionality to make that better, and I want to go through a few of these and what that means. So one of the features is this auto attendant and call queue. What does that mean for folks who are looking at this? What does that mean to them?
So, if you are in a center, in an environment, or you are running a small, medium business where you have a single number, but you have multiple people that are like tackling that scenario, right? You typically would have a common space where you have different devices deployed where multiple people are catering to their users and their customers, right? So, for some users, having a headset 8 hours a day might work. For others, they prefer something which is on a speakerphone or which has an individual handset where they can pick up the call and address those. We on native Teams phones, we actually have a UI today that caters to these multi-call scenarios as well. That is what we have today, but we are taking a phone first approach, a desk phone first approach, and we're actually investing a bunch of engineering resources and design resources in the next couple of quarters to optimize for these scenarios. We want to make it much easier and more intuitive for people who are going to be using these devices for 8 hours a day, so that it makes it easy. It causes less friction for them to use this, right? So we are actually, it's great that you bring that up, right? Shared line appearance is one of those features where this has been, it will be a primary focus for us this calendar year.
And then finally, policy-based recording solutions, because it's important that what's being said, and especially if there are certain keywords and phrases or things like that need to be tracked to be able to do that. So what does a policy-based recording solution mean?
So if a tenant admin wants to enable or disable recording of calls across all clients, whether it's the desktop client, the mobile client, or the Teams phone, the same feature will be supported. That's what's great about Teams, right? We are trying to bring a unified experience no matter what endpoint you're using. We want you to be so familiar with the features that the experience on desktop should not be glaringly different from what you're seeing on Teams phones. We are optimizing for the form factor, but the underlying user expectation will be met across different endpoints.
Now, these devices are Android-based, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So how secure are they? Do we need to use MFA with these? How do we ensure that these, and I know that they're supported through Windows Intune, but how do we make sure that these devices are secure so somebody just can't come up and, grab information off these, or in transit, things along that line? So let's talk a little bit about the security of these devices.
So all our devices, Teams phones and Teams displays, Teams panels, and we have MTRs as well, running on Android OS. The partners who provide the firmware and the hardware, they make sure they do their best to have updated it to the latest OS, as latest as possible. So we try to keep the OS updated, but we are working in an ecosystem where we can't keep up with the mobile device, right? So so we have to look at other ways of securing these devices. These devices run in kiosk mode, which means it does not have Google Play services. It does not have any connection to any outside world. The Teams is the only app that's running on it. There are other headless agents and other apps that are running on it. All are tied to authentication. So that's why I go back to it's a purpose-built Teams device. There's nothing but Teams on it. If Steven wants to install an app on it, Instagram, not going to happen because you don't have access to it. It's not rooted. ADB is not enabled. So we work with OEMs to make sure that end users are not able to customize, the environment, the Android environment on that device. It is a Teams device. The only thing that it does, it launches the Teams UI automatically. The only thing you can do is sign into it and access Teams content. Perfect. That's how we secure.
And I'll show an example of that. So here is a hot desk device that I have. This one is currently locked. You can see somebody can leave a note. And when I go to swipe it up, it's going to ask for my PIN code, which I have to have. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to show you all my PIN code. And now I'm in, and we can see that it is exactly that Teams that's showing me all my meetings. I can see calls, contacts, voicemail, all of that. There's no other screen that I can go to. I have the same sort of side panel that I would normally have with this. So, I can say, hey, I want to do it better together where I can tie it into a larger monitor or something along that line. But that's all I can really do with it. And there's a camera built into it, and that's what it does. So when we talk about purpose built, that's what we mean. Now, the device that I have did require MFA to log in the first time, but that's because of a policy that we have set to do that. And then it's for me to add a personal PIN when I do that. But what's great about this is if this were set up as a hot desk, maybe this is a good time to talk about hot desking. What does that mean? We use that term a lot, and this is a hot desking device, but what does hot desking actually mean? And why is it becoming such a fast growing area?
So we are all getting into hybrid work. Tenant admins are grappling with what would be best experiences for their users when people transition into work part-time. It's very common even within Microsoft where we work 3 days at home and 2 days at work and things like that. So we don't have dedicated desks at in our offices, but we still have device needs. I don't want to be carrying my second monitor. I don't want to be carrying, a dedicated phone or a calling and meeting device wherever I go. I would love it if Microsoft as a tenant is able to provide those devices, the work experience and the environment when I go into my office. So these spaces where you can walk in and out and make use of devices and capabilities in that area are called hot desk spaces. Our team is working with OEMs to build hot desk experiences on a variety. Again, there's no one solution that fits everybody. So, we want to provide a portfolio of devices. We're working with Yealink on the Desk Vision AIO. It's a 24-inch device. It can double up as your second monitor. I walk in. The user experience that I have is a shared space experience where I can reserve the space for the next 2 hours. If I was going to be camping in that area, I sign in with my credentials. I get all my team's content, my meetings, my calls, my chats, and my channels on the device. I join my meetings on the device. I use it for quick messaging to see if anybody is sending me notifications, if anybody is waiting on me for information. I use that. If I have to work on a PowerPoint or if I have to work on an Excel sheet, I can still hook it up to my laptop and use that device, the same device as a second monitor. When I'm done with it, I sign out. It goes back into the previous shared experience. None of my data is stored on the device. There is no knowledge of, Kritika having used that device to the next user. They just walk in, it's completely secure. So that's one form factor that we support. We're also going to bring hot desking to the Neat frame, which I have here. It is currently running a personal experience, but this is going to be supporting hot desk experiences as well. So think of a phone room, a 2-person room, a 1-person room. If you need to park yourself there for like a day, you'd want a device that offloads your calling and meeting experiences. The other scenario is like, I forgot my laptop. My laptop is out of charge. I don't know what meeting I have to join. What do? I rush into a huddle room. I sign in quickly. I'm able to take my meeting from there.
Yeah. This is also great for people maybe that are using something like an iPad or an Android tablet. What's great is they can have the meeting going on that while they're using their device to take notes and do that, not to feel the cameras getting all shaky, because these devices also have cameras. They have audio. They support Bluetooth, so you can add a Bluetooth headset to it. Make that the meeting device, and then make this where you're taking your notes or looking at things or projecting a deck or things like that, and even add it as a second device. So I'm in the meeting, I can project the deck, I can take notes, I can chat from this, and that's really the camera and how I went in the calendar and that. So it offers some flexibility for desktop workers to work in a way that they really have not been able to before, when they're not in a full laptop, multi-monitor, good camera scenario. And the cameras on these and the audio on these are remarkably good. I've been very, very impressed with the quality of these.
That is exactly right. The other thing is, I like when I'm doing, my one-on-ones, I don't want to multitask. If this is the device, I'm looking just at it. I'm not, working on an Excel sheet while I'm talking to somebody. It really helps you connect to the person that you're talking to. Right? Yeah. That is like when you want to focus. But it also lets me multitask when I'm on my computer. I'm looking at my ambient screen to see if there are any notifications, to
Right.
see, to keep me up to date, to triage. I do a first level of mini triage with that.
Yeah, a companion device. And that's true. That's the way I use mine is I'll look and go, oh, without having to switch out of the app I'm in, that's my next meeting. It's coming up. It dings. It lets me know. So it's also sort of becoming a second team screen for me, but not taking up the real estate. And it's smart. It allows me to do a little bit more. This is great stuff. We have tons of great vendors. It's Gartner Magic Quadrant for this. We're, in the leaders quadrant, but I want to talk about deployment because that's what our audience wants to hear about is this is all great. How difficult is it to deploy and secure these? And specifically, I want to talk about three areas. I want to talk about some best practices around authentication, how this works in sort of a shared room account, and management versus our admin center. So let's talk about authentication best practices.
Yeah. So our devices are basically, managed by Intune. We provide device management through Intune enrollment, right? So that's one level of security that we provide for tenants when deploying these devices. We've heard a lot of challenges. We've seen quite a bit from current deployments when we are not able to distinguish the device type. Today's tenants have Windows devices, they have mobile devices, which could be Android or iOS, and then there's this like a new device type that they don't understand how they're different from mobile devices, right? So we have to, when we are deploying devices as a tenant admin, we have to, like you correctly said, right? We have to think about authentication as a piece. We have to think about compliance as the next piece, which is through Intune enrollment. And then how do you keep these devices healthy and how do you keep these devices up to date? So that's device management through Teams Admin Center. Those are three pillars, the way I see it in my head. For authentication, very well said, right? There are shared space devices and then there are personal devices. You said you had to do MFA. Yes, because you were using it with your account. It's a personal account. Please enable MFA on all, these accounts if you think it's right for your tenant. We do it at Microsoft. But what if it is a device that is in a badged area in one of the Microsoft buildings? Is MFA right for us? I think Microsoft recommends, and we have documentation for that, where we say, if your device is deployed in shared spaces, in badged areas, please do not enable MFA. If we disable MFA, is the device going to be secure? Yes, there are other ways where you can enhance security. And one of the ways could be location-based compliance requirements, right? So if you say, this is the IP address range where my device should be accessing my tenant's information. If you have, you can set up requirements like that, again, in Endpoint Manager, so that you are making it safe. If you use the same account on a device that's not having that's not within that IP address range, it will actually fail authentication. So that's one awesome best practice that we should all consider when deploying shared spaces. The second one would be sign-in frequency. Stephen, we have in Microsoft sign-in frequency where n number of days you have to continuously re-authenticate. That could be 100, that could be 1 year, depending on what the tenant wants. But for shared space devices, it's the same thing, especially for common area phones or, MTRAs. Unless you have a technician who's going to go and re-authenticate those devices in the frequency that you want, sign-in frequency, having requirements on that does not seem like a good idea.
No.
Right. And then the third one I would say is, if you have, these are some of the common, tips that we want to share with tenant admins. If you have any conditional access policy or any compliance requirement for your devices, you need to have Intune enrollment and you need to have Azure ADP1 licenses. Like, these are common mistakes that we do for authentication.
So basically we're saying, hey, if it's connected to this Wi-Fi network, if it's geo-fenced or within this range, you're good. You can sit down. Is there the ability to perhaps hook this up to a badge reader where someone can tap their badge and go in? Is that something that we're thinking about? Because I actually got asked that question and I didn't have a good answer for it. One of our viewers asked that when we talked about this show.
We are actually constantly thinking about modernizing authentication. That would be amazing to have a badge reader. The other thought process that we have is, I have my mobile phone that's authenticated. If I walk into a room, there's a mobile phone. If I want to put in my credentials, is there a way to sign in from mobile? These are problems we're thinking about. I don't have answers, but I would love to have something.
No, but it's great that folks are sharing this and that they're engaged and that they're thinking about it. So awesome. So we have a demo. I want to kind of walk through this demo because we've said, hey, deployment's not too tough. So let's actually take a moment and let's do a demo.
I will be showing a quick tutorial on a few things to consider when deploying Teams Android devices. For demo purposes, I actually have a test user that is created in my demo tenant. The account is called Phone Rooms. This will be a common area phone device that I will be deploying in our tenant, just for demo purposes. The license that has been assigned for this is a common area phone license and a domestic calling plan. Starting early June 2022, the common area phone license is going to come included with the Azure AD P1 license, the Exchange Online P2 license, and the Microsoft Intune license, all within the existing price of $8 per device. This is going to be deployed this is going to be supported in the next upcoming update on the device. So another thing to note is when you're deploying these devices, there are typically 3 admin centers where we might need to navigate: the Azure AD Admin Center, the Endpoint Manager Admin Center, and the Teams Admin Center. In the Azure AD Admin Center, you will be able to manipulate users and groups. We could do the same on the Endpoint Manager. To keep things simple, we could do it here. The groups, when you want to create groups for your Teams Android devices, you can note that if we created these in Endpoint Manager, it would still work, it will still show up in the Azure AD directory, in the Azure AD Admin Center. So I'm going to create a new group for common area phones. And this is a dynamic group, which means if I added a query or a condition as part of this filter, anytime there is a new user account that is created with this requirement, it would dynamically be added to the group. So in this case, I am saying that UPN needs to start with PHR, phone room, for example. When we save this, a dynamic group is created here, and anytime I create a user with PHR, phone rooms, for example, it would get added to this particular group. It takes a while to show up here. So, right there, but it takes a while to add users. Right now it shows 0 users. We can come back to this. One other recommendation that we have for users, actually I can show here, is that if it is a shared space device, please do not enable multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor auth is typically deployed for user accounts and not necessarily required for shared room devices. So in our case, of course, there's a demo tenant, everything is disabled. We need to make sure that MFA is disabled for the shared space device as well. So what do we replace this with? Or what is a reasonably secure way of deploying if we don't have MFA? We can use location-based conditional access. So we go to devices, go to conditional access, and here are location groups that you can create. So let's say I am in Redmond. I mark this as a trusted location, and I can provide IP address ranges and mark those as trusted devices. So as long as the device that we are deploying is within this range of IP addresses, these devices can access our tenant data. So this is one way of providing security for our devices. Another requirement, this is not optional. So anytime you have a conditional access policy or a compliance policy, we need to know before deploying that Android device administrator is a requirement. So once you turn this on in your tenants, you will not be able to disable it, but this is a requirement if you have Intune enrollment. I am going to turn it on here. And we cannot, just to be sure, we cannot add any requirements around blocking Android enrollment using DA in our tenants. Quickly, I will leave this here, but I want to show a couple of other policies or best practices in Teams Admin Center. So Teams Admin Center is used for update management of devices, policy setup of Teams devices. We have all our categories supported here: Teams rooms on Windows, Android, Surface Hubs, panels, phones, and displays. I will show phones here. I have a user, Adele, signed in to my demo tenant at this point. Adele, let's assume, is in the product group that is, or in the IT group, right? So what I want to create is rings for deployment of these bills. Given that Adele is in my inner circle, I'm going to add her to a tag called ring 0. And the purpose of this is any user device that has this tag should be automatically updated on firmware, and this is automatically set. So this means that anytime Teams Admin Center has an update available, Adele's phone is going to get updated, and we test stability. So the Uber point is have different rings for different users. Ring 0 can be the innermost circle, ring 1, ring 2, ring 3, and ring 4 could be outer circles, where ring 4 will be the most secure population that can receive an update where automatically, not as soon as available, but maybe deferred by 30 days, because by 30 days we would have tested it on other rings. These are some of best practices that we would advocate for deployments. Another one would be to create notifications and alerts. So there's device state rule that we can create for, let's say, in this case, phone room 4125. It could be a group of users over here. And the alert is basically anytime a device health status goes offline, please send notifications. I'm just setting default here, but you could have a channel notification to all your IT admins, or you could have a default alert. So you activate it and you save it. These are a few best practices for deploying Teams phones or Teams Android devices in your tenant.
Awesome demo, and thank you. In there, you showed some compliance centers. So can we talk about the role of compliance in the Teams Admin Center?
Yeah. So if you, in your tenant, have conditional access policies enabled for these accounts, right? Which typically people do if they want Intune enrollment, you would have to have an Intune license. Intune enrollment in that case is mandatory for these devices. And for that, there are like 3 requirements or best practices. 1, Intune MDM authority needs to be enabled. 2, device administrator needs to be enabled in the tenant. And there are ways to restrict these policies specific to Teams Android devices and not to the rest of the Android devices in your environment. So for those, please use filters.
All right. Awesome. I got a hard question for you. Ready? What are we going to do, and what are we doing to continually improve performance in these devices? Because that thing we hear is it's great, but I want it faster. I want it to log into this. All of that. So what are we doing to improve performance?
It is one of the key pillars that we're working on, right? To have these devices run as fast as possible, to be as quick to, multiple call scenarios and things like that. In an effort to do that, our recommendation is please always update the devices and keep it updated to the latest and greatest firmware and apps. And why? Because we are always pushing app updates with these changes that we're making. We're making changes in multiple levels, right? We're making changes to the user experience on the device. We are making changes on the firmware as well. We are tackling crashes with every update. So when you go to Teams Admin Center, please make sure that you're always keeping your firmware and the app updated. I want to sneak in a little bit here and add some best practices for Teams Admin Center as well, right? In Microsoft Tenant, This is a best practice that we use where we have rings. We call them rings for deployments. So there's inner rings, and then, let's say inner rings are ring 0, and then you can walk it out to like up to ring 4 or ring 3, right? So ring 0 would be
Which, by the
people
way,
that,
is GA, enterprise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for everybody at home.
right. And if you are in the core working group of deploying these devices, be brave and jump onto ring 0. Anytime we have an update published on Teams Admin Center, please get those updates as soon as possible. Try them out, see if it works for your users, and then to bring high confidence, go and publish it to ring 1 after a week, and then ring 2 after a week. And then there should be some high touch scenarios like in Microsoft data centers or devices that we don't touch. So they are always ring 4 because they are the last ones to get the update. But
And if you're not sure what those new features are, please check out the What's New in Teams blog, because we publish that the first week of every month on all the features that were released the month before. So you have that awareness, as well as, of course, in Message Center.
And we also publish release notes. I can send a link to that. Every release, the day of the release, or at least the week of the release, we publish release notes. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will share that link. Krithika, this was awesome. And we crammed a lot of information into a short period of time. We're going to give some links on where folks can learn more. And of course, there's all of this and more in docs.microsoft.com. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. So this is our last show of the season. We will see you for season 6. We'll post when that first show's coming up. We have some awesome surprises for you. So I want to thank everybody who's been tuning in. And thanks so much. Tell us what you'd love to see next season. For Inside Microsoft Teams for season 5, I'm Stephen Rose. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in a few months. Take care, everybody.